Today we are talking about Reels. This is a topic that we've talked about for 3 decades, but really never talked about.
Right.
So I want to introduce, we've got Rachel today. How you doing, Rachel?
Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. Welcome to Zacuto Live, Not So Live. Today's topic is how to create an awesome filmmaker reel, and we are joined by my good friend Chris Weatherly, who's a commercial director with Wavelength Films. We're going to be discussing a little bit of history of reels, going into some Stephen Yen stuff, and then talk about the importance of a reel depending on your role and how often you need to update it, and some specifics like that. So let's get started. Thanks.
Obviously, this is I'm just going to say it anyways, but a reel essentially is a portfolio of your work. For those who don't know what a reel is, and it's obviously very important. And it's something that's kind of changed a lot that we've talked about from the days gone by because...
It's changed dramatically.
Why has it changed?
Well, mainly the internet, to me, is why it's changed, or how it's changed.
Yeah, that's one reason. And Chris, the other thing is that everybody is doing so many roles now. It's like in the old days, it was like you were a director, you were a cinematographer, you were an editor, and the reel was pretty simple. People send me reels nowadays for our video department, and it's like, I have absolutely no idea how to look at that reel because I don't know what they did. I don't know. And then there's this last factor, which is when you work for an agency, they've kind of forced that creative on you. So it's kind of hard to know, is that you that made that, or did somebody force you to make that?
Or what part of it is you?
Yeah,
Totally.
it's a mess now. It's not like the old days. Chris, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm kind of split. In my market, I'm more of a director, but I also do cinematography. I guess you would say I'm a cinematographer turned director, but a lot of smaller budgets, I do both roles. So I see a reel very important for a DP, but for a director, I found that I get more work from completed projects, so I can show that I can take a product or whatever and tell an entire story. So I have a split mind. I would argue cinematographers, reels, yes. Directors, it's not as important. It's more about the completed project that you can show a client, or that it just gets out there.
You have the luxury of the internet now, unlike me and Steve did back in the day. And I took a look, and you have organization. Like you have your completed projects, like you mentioned, that you could like direct somebody to or link somebody right to, and then you have some compilations on there. So really, you could have all your stuff available at an instant. I mean, we had to mail shit or have like live viewings and things like that.
Yeah.
So I guess that's the state of the business right now. How you organize that, you might have some input for our customers right now and our viewers.
Yeah.
And then we can kind of talk about some nostalgia afterward, maybe.
Yeah, let's talk about that. In other words, and this is the thing that I don't know what I like. Well, I do know what I like. In other words, do you show snippets of different projects, or, way back, we used to just put a piece of music down and put imagery. But for you, that was fine because you were a DP. But as a production company, so some of these, you're like an independent agent or you're a production company.
Right.
So if you're a production company, I'd probably want to see snippets.
Right. Well,
How about you, Chris?
What do you do now, Chris?
As a director, I show completed films. So if you go to my website, I have my top 6 best projects on there. And that's kind of how I curate. And you're right. It is great that we have the internet. I think the careful thing with it is you have to curate properly, because you can have a whole bunch of stuff out there and really... I don't know, it's just all out there. So with my website, I curate and I'm very specific. And the other great thing, when I do pitches or treatments, I typically do them off the back end of my website, and I can actually embed some of my work into that treatment as well. So it is way more convenient than it used to be, and does make life much easier.
That's cool. So I guess really the technique now and the talent in the real part of it for you is to not have too much, because I guess, like I was saying to Steve earlier, that there's way too much stuff. I'm gonna get disinterested, and there's too much to wade through. So yeah, curating it, like you said, is probably really important.
Yeah, exactly. And then within a treatment itself, I even limit myself, because I'm trying to agencies and clients aren't going to buy what they can't see. So you don't want to give them a bunch of stuff that is not relevant to your pitch or your treatment. So I try to even curate even more when I'm pitching an idea to someone.
Yeah, there's the old story about if you didn't have a video about a bolt and you're pitching a bolt company, they can't make that leap.
No, the story, that happened to us, where we made a video for Easy Anchor.
Yes.
And which was like this thing you put in the drywall,
right,
and then you put a screw into it. And we pitched, I can't remember who it was, a company that made nuts and bolts. And we're like, oh, we got this deal.
Yeah.
And they were like, oh, we saw somebody who had a video that actually did do nuts and bolts.
Right.
And I'm like, wow, you can't make that leap from a
Right.
screw
Yeah.
to a nut in a bolt.
So that still holds true, I guess. So you tailor it for the specific client. And you can do it on the instant right now. See, we would have to have edited that and mailed it or had a viewing or something. So
and we did do that. In other words, we would sometimes create a little, we would just send them a video, that said, here is a screw video, and hopefully you can make that leap. But
not those words, but
yeah, exactly. But the interesting thing is that I like that Chris is doing is that you can now with the internet, you can say, oh, here are my nut and bolt and screw videos. Here are my fashion videos. Here are my corporate talking head videos. Here are my scenic videos, real estate, whatever. You could break it up into groups.
Right.
Is that something that you like to do, Chris?
I have my favorite genres, and I know what I'm really good at. I'm in a medium-sized market, so I have to be kind of everything to everybody at times. I try to be. Honestly, I never really show my corporate stuff, although I do get a lot of corporate gigs. But those gigs come from more of my commercial reel stuff or more short film stuff, because they say, "Oh, if you can do that." And we want that style, but we just want it more in a corporate format, that tends to sell pretty well. And I will add, and you guys know this, your best work typically is spec or passion projects. So one project I did 2 years ago has got me more work than anything else. And it's not a reel, it's just a 60-second commercial I did for a local coffee shop. And I did it just because I needed to improve my reel or show others what I can really do, sell myself through producing a really good commercial. And that's what's actually helped me more than anything, is just doing a passion spec project.
All right, let's take a look at some of your work. Okay, so that's a terrific reel. But the question is how is a nut and bolt company going to react to that? What do you think, Chris?
Yeah, we said it earlier. A client isn't going to buy what they can't see. It's just if they can't see it, it's very hard to sell them on it. Maybe a client would say, "Oh, that's really cool stuff," and you have great visuals. For me, that's more of a DP reel than it is a director reel. So I'm with you. It's just a lot of clients, if they can't see their product on the screen, it's very hard to sell them that you're the right person for the job.
I mean, really, the reel concept is only really necessary if we're talking about corporate video. I mean, yes, you could have a reel for independent film, but I mean, who are you really selling that to? Maybe an investor, I get that. And that's one thing, but I mean, I think that I'm going to kind of guide this conversation to corporate video, because if you're going to have a reel that's going to go to an investor, it's just going to be snippets of your work.
Could be commercials as well. You know, agencies need reels.
Well, no, but that's a commercial reel then. You know,
Right.
so if you do spots, then you create a spot reel that is, you know, your various spots just connected together.
Which that piece was perfect for, by the way. You got a lot of work from that?
Yeah, I still get more work from spec work, I would say, that shows that I can tell a complete story and, you know, the overall visuals. But yeah, I think it's definitely helped me. For me as a director, I like to see a DP's reel. It's almost like a teaser for me. I can look through their stuff very quickly, and if I like them and think I might want to hire them, then I dig deeper and try to look more into what projects that DP has done and see if they can be outstanding all the way through an entire project. Because the thing about reels is it's a highlight reel. So, you know, in a feature or even a short film, I might have 5 amazing shots, but if as a cinematographer I can't pull off that consistently throughout an entire project, I don't want to hire that person.
Good point.
So yeah, so for me as a director, I like reels from cinematographers, but that's almost like the calling card, and then I'm going to dig deeper. And again, comes back to the internet. I can usually find more work that person has done and dig deeper and see how, you know, something that might be longer, and see if they're really, really good at telling a complete story, or if they can make consistent, you know, ratio exposures and all that kind of business.
All right, well, let's break this down a little bit, because let's start at the top. So if you're a producer, a producer's reel should show snippets of various type of work they've done. Okay, so then we go to a director. If you're a director, you're going to probably want to do what Chris said and show actual storytelling of one kind or another. If you're a spot director, you're just going to show spots.
Right.
But if you're, let's say, you know,
you need to see that from beginning to end to see if that director can carry the story and,
Exactly.
and
Yeah.
tell the message, right?
Yeah. I mean, if I were a producer, I'd want to show things that obviously had successes and were well known. Okay, let's move down now. If you're a production company, you have to tell stories. So I'm going to, again, want to be back to that storytelling. So a music with imagery ain't going to work there.
Right, and a production company wants to show like their best customers too, like their high-end customers.
Oh yeah, exactly, right. You know, we did that too. You want to show Discover Card and, you know, McDonald's and all of that.
Right.
Okay, so let's move down a notch. If you're a DP, music and imagery, perfect. You've got 20 reels like that you've edited.
Create the emotion with that too.
Unfortunately, none of them are on anything beyond Betacam, so we can't really show one.
Yeah, it's on these things.
Yeah, I mean, so that's kind of difficult. Now let's move down. So if you're an editor, now this can go 2 ways. I've seen editor reels, well, I have seen them where it's music and imagery, which I don't like. But, you know,
Yeah, because you're editing sound and there's timing involved.
it's storytelling.
Yeah, so yeah.
So, you know, I would want to see storytelling.
Right.
And beyond that, I don't think you need a reel. You know, if you're a grip or an assistant or, you know, maybe I guess if you're...
You just have credits at that point.
Yeah, at that point. So, Chris, how do you feel about all this?
No, I agree with you. It's like the more specific you can get in your reel, the more targeted you can be with your audience. So I think you're on track. It's like directors and editors really have to show that they can tell a story. Cinematographers just have to show that they can make pretty pictures. I'm overgeneralizing, but that's really what it's about. And, you know, I'm not at a producer level, so I've really never had to make that type of reel. But I'm with you. You would want to show your best work and also show off, you know, your biggest clients to show others that, hey, I can, you know, I've done national level kind of things.
All right, I'm going to show a reel that we did around 2000, but many of the elements were from the 90s and even some from the 80s.
Spirited, inspiring, relax, drama, Spiegel Group style, Spiegel Group style.
One of my favorite programs costs nothing, saves postage, check fees, and worry. It's the direct payment plan, which automatically deducts my payment from my bank account in case I happen to be too busy.
So, Chris, that was a pretty crazy reel, but what we did there is we created it so that it could be used independently by Jens or by Lucy or by me, because it laid out who was the editor of all those projects, who was the director, and who was the cinematographer. And some of those were kind of interesting, where we talked about how you had to shoot vertical that one girl on film and then key her against those background plates. And the same with that Discover card. That was actually a manufactured, we had that constructed in the background. It wasn't a keyed element. And that song, Spiegel Group Style, we actually wrote. We had a composer on staff at that time, and we had musicians perform that song and recording it. So I mean, things nowadays, my God, has it gotten so much easier. But still, you couldn't do that custom, you still have to perform and do a song like that.
Right, and as a freelancer, like I was saying, that I had to budget for these reels. I mean, it was a production in itself, and there was mailing costs, there was all, just the producing of the tapes and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So getting back to the web, Chris, how do we use that as a tool to communicate all these different ideas? But then the other problem is you don't really get people's attention very long. So in a way, I don't know that it's that much better. It's like I said here is my one performance. Now you've got 14 different options. Is it good to just create a one performance, or is it better to have let them pick of what they want to watch?
Well, first off, I think it's interesting that on what you just showed, which was, it's awesome. It's, it's stylized and dated, but it's still really great stuff. But it is interesting that you guys had to make it a multi-reel. It's Jen's work, it's the editor, it's all these things, because the time and money it cost at that point to do those things, you had to make it worth, you're trying to sell it to quite a varied audience. And now with the internet, you can get very, very specific. Editing is super cheap. It just costs you your own time. So there are, huge differences. I'm just so happy that I got into this when it got easy, because you guys really had to put a lot of work into that. But what you're saying, I think that the advantage of the internet is just being very specific. It's like I can cut a very specific thing and show a client if I want to. You're right, there is tons of stuff out there. You can get overwhelmed by things, but when you're working directly with an agency or a client, you can get very specific and send it directly to them. And that's the advantage now. And as opposed to what you just showed me, that's like kind of a DP editor reel, I can have a very specific reel for a very specific client and very specific job. So that's the advantage of the internet.
I would agree. That is a really incredible advantage. But I personally think that it was better when there were fewer production companies, like when we were younger, and they took bids from 3 different people. It wasn't like now they've got the entire globe. So it's like I actually think it's a harder sell now, where you have so many things to look at that most people, when they send me reels, I look at the first 10 seconds because I got to go through 30 of them. Before I had to go through 3, I'd actually watch the thing.
Right, and it's easy just to click the mouse and go on to the next one, whereas the other one, you put the tape in, you were committed once you hit
you're
play.
Committed, man. It's like going into a movie theater. You paid your money, man. You're watching that whole movie.
Right.
Okay, I want to wrap this up, but I want to hit one last topic that we didn't really get into, which is length. That's always an issue. How long should this be? I think our reels were in the 5-minute category, which is way too long nowadays. Chris, what are you thinking?
Oh yeah, gosh, you're lucky to keep an audience on the internet for 90 seconds, you know. So now, again, if I'm sending this directly to a client, 3 minutes is the max, but I'm really trying to keep it 2 minutes and shorter, because attention spans are just shorter nowadays. So the shorter, the better.
Wow. So like if you're creating spots, that means you get to show like 3 spots.
Yeah, if you're lucky.
You know, if you're lucky.
I really try to send my best thing is what I try to do, especially if I think it addresses what the client or the agency is interested in. So I'm really trying to give them the cream, the very best thing that I've made, instead of sending them a whole bunch of stuff and overwhelming them and wasting their time. You're right. I love what you said. You know, back in the day, you had to put it in. You know, you had to put your tape in, and people had to watch it. But it is a great point. There's so much now, and there's so many more people in this industry, and it's so much easier to get into and cheaper. I think that's why there's more people in it. There is a lot more competition. So, you know, it's the reel is a big part of it, but another thing we haven't even addressed is relationship. You know, I can have great and amazing work, but if I don't have a relationship with the agency or the people involved, that makes it more difficult. So I think that's why we see people who do one job for an agency or a client and it's gone well, they tend to return back to you because not only are you good at what you do, but you're a responsible, great human being. It's easy to work with.
Absolutely. I mean, that is one thing I was actually going to bring up. It's like once you get a client, you don't lose that client. Mm-hmm. I mean, it is so hard to get a client. Why would you? I mean, you gotta sometimes take it on the chin. Mm-hmm. I mean, remember we worked for about 18 years with Jim Beam Brands, Firestone, McDonald's, Sears. Mm-hmm. We never let them go, man. Right. I mean, if you don't get into an argument, you don't do anything.
Mm-hmm. You did what you had to do.
You do what you got to do because. And the other thing we didn't talk about is, you know, if you can find these clients, how to cultivate a client that doesn't know a lot about video. Remember when we started mm-hmm. working with Jim Beam, they didn't know anything. Mm-hmm. They would say, here's the bottle, here's the label, and we're thinking it's going to be 21 to 25-year-olds. And we were like, great. And same thing when we were in the fashion industry, you know, try to find industries where it's kind of new using video, and then the client will trust in you and you'll be able to actually create the vision that you want to create and not have a client dictating to you what they want to
mm-hmm.
do.
If you can find that.
Yeah, if you can find it. Well, Chris, it was great having you on this show today. This is a tough topic and one that we've never really addressed, but it's one that every single person who wants to sell themselves needs to do.
Yeah, I agree. And I'll go back to it. For me as a director, reel not as important. I just got to show some really amazing completed projects. DPs, I think, is essential. I think you need to update it every year, if not more frequently. But yeah, I appreciate you guys having me on. And yeah, it's a huge deal. And it's just making time to do that. The great thing is if you're so busy you can't make a reel, that's a great excuse. So I'm down with that. But if you have the time, it's best to update your reel anytime you can.
That's an excellent way to end it. Rachel?
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Thank you, Chris, for coming. A big thank you to iCan, who provide all the lighting for our show, and to our sponsors, Canon, Rode Mics, and Kessler Crane. We'll see you guys in a couple of weeks with a new show. Bye.